So this is part 3 of the airbrush video series. It's actually coming out before part 2 because part 2 is very involved. That way for Wednesday, you got one. So I have my Harbor Freight airbrush here, double action. That's what I'm going to do this demo with. I might pull out one of the Harbor Freight ones for another piece, but I'm going to cover 2 things. I'm going to cover airbrush drills, and I'm going to cover stencil use. Stencils are very important to airbrush work. They allow a level of precision that you just can't get without them. Airbrush tends to look a little fuzzy, and it won't look near as fuzzy if you are using stencils. So when you first start using your airbrush, I want to show you things that I have on hand. I'm using acrylic paint in here. It's acrylic paint thinned with water. That's regular old craft paint. This stuff here, this is what I practice with. I'll do that in episode 2, but this thinned with water is what I often practice with. So everything I'm doing today is a water-based paint. So along with my pre-mixed half and half, I also have an airbrush bottle just of water so that I can clean the airbrush in between colors or when I'm done. I also have a little piece of foam with some stick pins. And what those are for is just to poke down these holes here on this airbrush bottle. There's a little hole right here, and that gets clogged up sometimes. So if you have a pin on hand, then you're able to fix that clog, no problem. Doing a basic line with the airbrush, I'm going to go ahead and just start a line, and I stop my line. I want you to notice there's a ball on each end of that line. So what I want you guys to do to practice, and that ball happens because you were stopped. So it got more paint right here than it got during the run of the line. So I'm going to have you guys practice by doing 2 lines up and down and do lines in between them and try not to get the ball on the end. The way you do that is by moving your wrist. You want to move and keep moving as you go through that line. So I'm going to hit. And I don't just stop my hand, I want to pull it off that way, all right? So don't pull it off. All right, there's no ball on the end of these. This one starts really soft. You want to try and start a little firmer than that. But if you just keep your hand moving, you won't get that ball. I got a ball over here because I just stopped my hand. But keep your hand moving. And you can do a nice thin line. You should be able to do a variety of lines with your airbrush. You want to be able to back up. You go back, you can do a nice, wide, thick line. Get a little bit closer, and it's not going to be as thick. Closer, 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 closer. See, you can get pretty thin with your lines here. Let me, I write my name. That's one of the things that I do to practice. My name's pretty loopy, so it's an easy cursive write. That is by no means, those are a little bit less than 1/8 of an inch thick, those lines. That's by no means the thinnest that you can go with an airbrush. The higher quality the airbrush, the thinner the lines that you can make. For most everything that I do in haunted houses, this is sufficient, which is why this is sufficient. If you are looking at this and it is lacking to you in detail, well, what you could probably do, by all means, is get a fancier airbrush, like an Iwata Eclipse or Iwata Revolution, something, one of those nice, and then you can do finer detailed lines. This isn't machined for that. That's about the best I'm going to get. Let me try and go smaller, and I'll see if I can prove myself wrong. So I did get small, but it's not consistent. I'm much more likely to get a blob of paint or something out of it. I can keep this pretty consistent. It's real tough when you get down this small with this guy. You can get down to fine point Sharpie level. Keep a nice clean airbrush. You'll get better detail, of course. All right, so here's a nice clean sheet, and this is a quick working drill. I want to do 6 lines vertical and then 6 lines horizontal with even spacing. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6. Look for your balls. They're not too bad. I've got a bit of a ball on this one here, and I started okay. I tend to start with a bit of a curve. It's really hard to start a line with your hand moving, so often I will hide the start of my line somewhere. Like I might hide it in the hairline and then go from there. That way it's not going to be blaringly obvious. But every now and then I'll get that curve in there, and often it's part of a whole piece of artwork, so it's not a big deal. You know, you just accept that and move on. I'm going to go ahead and do my vertical lines now. All right, so here's a quick grid that I did. Now, with a finer degree of control, what I want to do is I want to go in and I'm going to slash across each of these boxes. Something else that's a little bit tough, I want to join these up. I want them to line up right. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to fix those lines before I do my slashes. All right, you want them to not look too overdone. You don't want to look like you, bam, laid down another bit of spray paint on there. You want it to kind of be a nice blend in. So practice subtlety. Subtlety will take you very far. Yes, anyone can make paint come out of this. It's having control, being subtle, being able to get the paint where you want it. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to do diagonal slashes in one direction through all of these boxes. Concentrate on making it start in this corner and go all the way to that corner and trying to make a straight line. So you guys might be noticing the more I use the airbrush, even through this demo, the better I get. So often, if I'm about to do a night's worth of makeup, I'll run through this whole practice drill. Then I'm warmed up and I'm ready, and I have a lot more control if I just started cold. So you can see my lines kind of get better as I go. I have slashed one direction. I'm going to slash through the other direction. So I'm going to make a little X in each of these squares. All right, now I've done an X in each of those squares. Now I want to put a dot in each of these squares, but I want to make the dots bigger as I go. I want to start with small dots and go to a big dot. Small dot to a big dot, small dot to a big dot. And a dot is just being in one spot and pulling back to get paint. Big dot, small dot. And I'm going to get a bigger dot by pulling back a little bit. Big dot, further back. Not a very well-defined edge. I can come in. I could actually sharpen that edge up to make that dot a little stronger. Small to big. So I just had something happen in some of my big dots, and that happens in your big dots sometimes. It's called spidering. And what happens is you're putting out a lot of liquid paint with air, and that air is going to push that paint around, so there's little runs in it. So you want to be careful of that. A little further back, you get a wider spread, but the air affects it less. That's something you have to just get used to with your airbrush. And some paints will do that worse than others. If it's doing it to you all the time, thicken your paint. All right, so this is the drill. That's the whole drill. Looks like you're doing like weird cubist art, but that's the whole drill. You should be able to do this pretty fast. It's not something you want to take forever on. This is to get you dialed in. Let me flip this over, and I'll do one at speed. I was giving airbrush lessons in here earlier, so. And right now I'm just airbrushing on white styrofoam. Have a bunch of this laying around. I can still use it, I can still cut it, but it's a great surface to catch up some airbrush paint. Nice and solid. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to knock out one more of those drills, and I'll do it at speed that I would normally do it at. I'm having an issue where I'm getting a stuttering line. So I'm going to spray it on something. Try not to spray it on your hand. That's a bad habit. I'm going to find something. I'm going to spray it. Just let it run full bore for a little bit. Get the kinks out of the engine, you know. Now I'll go back to my line work. All right, so that's my drill. Now, and I want to look at what I did. I just want to do it and let it go into oblivion. I want to look at what I did. What happened here? I noticed that when I started slashing, I had a wave in my line. So I wanted to, after I saw this wave show up a couple different times, I start, I dip down, I go over. That's not a straight slash across, and that's what I was aiming for. So I started to work on making sure that my slashes were straighter. I don't want to just do it the wrong way. I want to try to find it and dial it in. That's the whole point of this. It should take you about 2 minutes or so to get this sucker knocked out if your airbrush is working properly. So I'm going to swap airbrushes to the big Harbor Freight airbrush and talk a little bit about stencils. What is a stencil? A stencil is a cheat. It is basically a way of masking off areas so the paint you spray out of an airbrush doesn't land on that area. Some of the first cave paintings in the world were people put paint in their mouth, you know, whatever they mixed up to use as pigment. They put their hand on the cave wall and they spit around it and they got the outline of their hand. That's a stencil. So cavemen can do it. You got this. It is a very easy thing to do. Here's the other airbrush. Switching out, poking hole. I use this guy for stencils more than the other kind because the other kind is capable of a lot of detail and this airbrush just isn't. But I can mock a lot of what that detail does with this airbrush by using stencils. It's a key part of my plan when I do makeup stuff. So just to show you what I'm talking about, and this is a good thing to practice, is here's just a note card, 3x5 card. Buy 100 of them at the dollar store. Sometimes you can buy 400 at the dollar store. But here's a line with that airbrush. Here's a line with using this card as a stencil. Look at how much sharper that is. Look at how much sharper that edge is because I had it blocked off with this card. It's just as blurry as that line, but there's half the paint on the card. So I can do a neat glowing box, you know, where all right, so that's just a stencil. Okay, that's how I got that precise shape. Using this technique with spray paint, if you watch my scenic painting, I do this all the time with just big spray paint. It's the same thing, only it's smaller. If I want to get those hard lines, I can just use a 3x5 card. You know, what visual interest we've added to this piece just by moving that card down as I go. My stencil, my 3x5 card, is short. That doesn't matter as long as you hold it flat against it and you can move it right with your airbrush and get a longer line by using a shorter stencil. Let's say you have a character that has a real precise detail. You wouldn't dare dream of doing it with this airbrush. Well, you can do it with a stencil. Emerald, who is my head makeup artist here at Dark Hour, I've worked with her for years. She's awesome. Well, we had a character that had all this intricate writing on them. It was a priest, and I had all this little demonic writing all over him. Well, she made this stencil. This is vellum, or a transparency film. And you take a soldering iron or a stencil cutter, stencil burner, and you can do all kinds of ornate detail. Just by this guy. That's why I love this airbrush. If you cheat, you can still get the same level of detail. All right, so you can always make your own. stencil. This is from a company called Badass Stencils. Or it's a product called Badass Stencils. Look up Badass Stencils. They're these little tags like this. I use these for makeup all the time. And it gives you a nice organic array of just pattern. It's a breakup. And just that's an area of infection if I use the right colors. Practice your stencils first with one color. And then as you work on layering colors and what has to go on top of what, you can do amazing things with stencils. So some other stencils. Here's another 3x5 card. We just finished our Christmas show here. And on Wreck the Halls, we have a lot of like jagged icicle lines and a couple of the elf makeups and things. Well, there's my jaggedness. Look at that. You see if I can use the color blue over top of a white or white over top of a blue, I'd get a nice ice look with that. It's a no card. This was a penny. All right. So I found some cool fabric. It's almost lace-like. This is pretty stiff now from having so much paint on it. But when I do a lizard person, this is it. Fishnet pantyhose, awesome for this. But this little piece of fabric, I can dip it in alcohol, kill any germs, let it dry, then it can go on the actor's skin again. So if I'm doing makeup or a prop, you can't tell me that doesn't look like lizard skin. Look at the lizardness of it. So imagine that. You do a black background, so then all of these little dots would be bright green, and everything in the background is black. Awesome. Okay. And then this is a stencil I got from Hobby Lobby. It is called Organic. I'll put a link into it because it's just so intricate and it's such a good breakup. It is such a good breakup of one color. And when you apply it, just spin it around a little bit. If you do a stencil over and over, you can get a repeat where it looks like the same pattern over and over. Just spin your stencil as you go. You won't put it in the same spot. Keep baby wipes soaked in alcohol. You can wipe your stencils down in between actors to, you're not going to go skin to skin without disinfecting it first. But there's so many different kinds of stencils out there that give such a different look, and you can make your own. There's no reason not to. You can make a 5-minute makeup look like a 20-minute makeup or a 30-minute makeup by using stencils in the right way. So, note card. I'm going to rip in a regular piece off of it. Nice scalloped edge. I just ripped it. All right, now could you rip out a zombie bite? Yeah, you could. But now I can airbrush red inside of there, just fill that with red, and I've made a hole going into my actor's skin by using just a little piece of this stencil. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with stencils. So many different things. So I just cut a half circle out of this and made a vague circle. But what I'm going to do, I'm not going to do the whole circle. I'm not going to just fill this in. The haze will actually fill in the top for me. And I'm just going to fill in the bottom. And now I have a ball with a light coming down on top of it. Because the airbrush is awesome. It looks 3D. It's like I can grab it. All right, so that is an airbrush drill that you can do to knock out, and that is an introduction to stencils. Everything is a stencil. Open your mind up. Stencils are awesome, and they can make this crappy $10 Miracle airbrush do amazingly detailed work just by doing the stencils. Look at the little ball I'm holding. Isn't that neat? No, it's not. It's just paint.